Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And there is a big patch dropping this weekend, 10.0.5, and with it, massive talent tree overhauls, massive class changes, retuning, balancing, nerfs, huge amounts of volume of stuff coming, which means we got to update the good old tier list here for competitive PvP and try and get a good idea of where to expect these specializations to land as a result of all of these sweeping changes. And if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with everything related to World of Warcraft in terms of news and balance changes, then make sure to hit the subscribe button, as this is going to be an excellent resource to do that. Now let's get started. We're going to be looking at the melee DPS first, but we will be covering all of the specializations in this video. The Frost Death Knight. Unfortunately, I don't see the Frost Death Knight really moving too much from the previous patch to this one. It's still going to be in a niche position, likely still a bit inferior to Unholy, but only a little bit due to the nerfs that Unholy is receiving. My expectation is that it'll probably be middle of the pack. You can still make it work if you want to be playing the Frost Death Knight, but it will likely struggle to a lot of the more powerful specializations currently expected to be in 10.0.5. Now for Unholy Death Knight, it was currently in a godly status. But I think that godly status may be getting reined in a bit, and this is mostly due to the fact that they are nerfing their damage output overall, as well as readjusting Spell Warden to be less valuable. I do think that this is likely to bring down the strengths of Unholy overall. It's going to be more susceptible in more cases and likely remove its godlike status, but still remain one of the most competitive options and versatile specializations in the game. So it's likely going to be going into the A tier. Demon Hunter, as a result of nerfs to other melee classes, my expectations for Havoc Demon Hunter is that it will then take the place of S tier once again, as it is still going to be doing tremendous amounts of damage, if not probably higher than a lot of the other classes that it had to compete with due to the nerfs that they are receiving. Now, Ret Paladin, unfortunately, this is a specialization that with the boat that you're in, you are either killing somebody with one attack and it feels really unfair and a lot of people are climbing kind of unjustifiably, or you're just going to kind of run around doing a whole lot of nothing. And due to the fact that your major burst abilities are being nerfed, it's probably going to be the latter, where you're running around doing a whole lot of nothing. So I'm not really expecting Ret to end up in a phenomenal place with 10.0.5 with those recent PvP changes, especially the trinket changes that are aiming to slow down the game, increase stamina. These are all things that are going to be anti-Ret Paladin here in 10.0.5. Now for Feral Druids, your overall damage is getting nerfed. This is one of the key factors to you being so powerful at the moment, as well as your survivability, with Frenzied Regen being targeted quite heavily. So due to these survivability reductions, due to this overall damage reduction, there are some talent revamps, so you may be more oriented towards Ferocious Bite builds, which is going to limit your versatility in terms of comps, as previously with the bleed build, you could likely run with some casters, focus on just doing damage. And due to that versatility nerf, the flexibility, and survivability, it's my expectation that Feral probably ends up on a low A or possibly a high B, but it's going to be pretty wounded after the changes that have come through onto it. Survival Hunter, with your 4-piece bonus, we already saw how amazing it can perform. It does massive amounts of burst damage, definitely an underrated spec. And with changes to your pet's survivability and Blessing of Sacrifice or Roar of Sacrifice redirecting less damage, your pet is going to be way less susceptible to going down. So it's my expectation that Survival Hunter, or just Hunter in general, is going to be in a lot better of a position overall for this patch, aside from one of the specializations which we will get to in a moment due to a certain ability that's really key being removed. Now, Windwalker Monk has amazing set bonuses. It's likely to be a monster when it comes to 10.0.5. I'm expecting this specialization to roll people over with burst. Do note your survivability is still going to be a bit of an issue, and that's the main thing that's making it tough for me right now to juggle it between a very high A, if not the best A tier spec, to a low S. Right now, probably more comfortable putting it as a high A, as I think there's other specializations that could outperform it. Now, Arms Warrior, you're getting survivability buffs, you're getting some rewinds on nerfs that were made to you in PvP with your D stance, you're getting damage buffs. It's a really good time and position to be an Arms Warrior, but do note that even though Ignore Pain is coming back, it will be a version of Ignore Pain without a conduit, which means it'll be a lot less overall effective, and you still don't have the Intervene Safeguard conduit from Shadowlands that is really what enabled Arms Warrior to dominate as a melee class, just having such a low cooldown damage reduction for an ally was very potent. So I think that its survivability is still likely not going to be absolutely spectacular. Kind of a wait and see, depends on the tuning of Ignore Pain. If Ignore Pain is absolutely absurd, then it could be an S tier specialization. I'm expecting it to be very strong, which is why I'm aiming it towards the top end of the A tier, but it's more a wait and see of how valuable is Ignore Pain actually going to be. Now, Outlaw Rogue, it's an all right spec. It's decently well-rounded. I think you can make it work, but it's kind of just like, why wouldn't you be Assassination? So for me, Outlaw is probably more middle of the pack. It does a bunch of cleave damage. You can take people down. Slower meta is likely going to be more favorable to Outlaw, so possibly a low A at the moment for it, but I feel probably more comfortable putting it in a high B just due to the fact that Assassination Rogue, which I think is probably going to be the best specialization in the game, is directly competing with it as a spec whenever you're looking for groups or whenever you're in solo shuffle. It's going to be a much more slower brawler based spec and have a niche as opposed to Assassination, which is going to be running people over. I don't know how Assassination snuck by. It must have vanished or something to avoid some nerfs here, but Assassination Rogue is going to be absolutely deadly with its 4-piece. And do know this is a tier list constructed assuming you have your 4-piece because those are instrumental in how powerful a lot of these specializations are going to be moving forward, but Assassination is going to be the top dog. Now, Subtlety Rogue, we saw Subtlety Rogue perform decently well. It seems to be completely reliant on secret technique to execute on its kills during Smoke Bomb, during Shadowy Duel, these kind of cheesy moments. And you could definitely climb with it, but it'll be a lot harder than other specializations. So I'm honestly putting it in B in the middle. While in the highest competitive play in certain comps, you can make it work. I think that it can kind of be countered as soon as people start to learn how it works with these abilities, and you can preempt their attacks and deny them before it gets in there. And we saw the Subtlety Rogue team kind of be snuffed out a little bit early on in competition, but you could definitely make it work. Again, directly competing with Assassination is one of its main problems in my opinion. Now, Enhancement Shaman, you're getting some healing buffs surprisingly, which is really not what you needed. I think Enhancement is probably going to struggle still, even with the healing buffs. You, again, much like Rhett, when you were critting Ellie Blast for everyone's 100% of someone's HP, you were in a really good spot. They took that away from you, you were suddenly not in a good spot. So I think it's probably makes sense for these two specializations to be hanging out in the C tier, possibly the D tier. For 10.0.5. Fury Warrior, another one, not really a super big winner just because they have not reset the Slaughterhouse nerf. They're extending the duration of it. They're giving you some damage buffs. So there's some possibility, which is the only reason why I'm putting you up on B. I honestly want to put you on C, possibly D, because not being able to maintain that high stack of MS, it's really tough for your damage to feel valuable. It's just going to be easily recovered later on in the fight. So this is honestly a generous position to be putting Fury Warrior, so take that into account. Now, Balance Druid, I'm not expecting these changes to really affect Balance Druid's performance very much, mostly because there's buffs, but there's also nerfs to counteract a lot of those buffs. So my expectation is that Boomkin is probably not going to move too much, if at all. I'm really tempted to honestly just put it on D tier, but maybe I'm being biased. It's got some good utility and crowd control. It's still, if you're really good, you're probably going to be able to make it work in solo shuffle. Ranked 3s, I think you got like next to no shot on really having a good performance with it, unfortunately. So still hanging out at about the bottom here for 10.0.5. Devastation Evoker got devastated by this most recent round of changes, much the same as Enhance and Ret. If you're not one-shotting people with Deep Breath or Dragon's Rage, I'm not sure if you're really going to be able to end games, and if you can't end games, then you're going to get run over. Your defensives are way weaker. It just comes down to, if the game isn't about killing somebody really fast, the game is about living as long as possible, and this is not a spec that is good at living very long. So to me, it's probably going to end up in the middle of the pack. A little bit better than the other specs just because its overall damage is going to be better. But I'm pretty tempted to put it into C, but maybe middle B tier is a better suited position for it. We'll keep the melee next to each other, the range next to each other, and you should only compare range to range and melee to melee. Beast Mastery Hunter, probably going to be the best hunter spec. I'm putting this in like a low A position just because I think its survivability is still weak, but the changes to Roar Sacrifice, pet survivability, it's just a solid spec on just running people down. Jungle Cleave going to be really good for you. Not the most versatile spec when it comes to solo shuffle, but you can probably still make it work in a lot of scenarios just by focusing on damage output and avoiding damage. And a lot of these burst classes that could catch you off guard aren't going to be bursting you as hard, so you got that going for yourself as well for Beast Mastery. Now, Marksmanship Hunter, I'm sorry, guys, but I think the spec is D for dead. You got your double tap deleted. You're a spec that relies 100% on like absolutely KOing somebody. And with the direction that these changes are going in and the removal of double tap, that's just becoming less and less likely, and you're just going to be more of a liability with limited survivability. So I think Marksmanship Hunter is probably in the dirt. D for dirt. Going to be rough. Arcane Mage, I'm expecting this still to be an A tier specialization. It's just got really high burst. They are targeting the execute mechanic of your barrage, so maybe not going so much towards it. I think you're still going to want to pick it up, but you're still going to bring in a ton of mobility, a lot of utility, really tough to kind of like pin down, and your overall damage is likely still going to be better. Although Fire and Frost are receiving buffs. Now, Fire Mage is one of these specs where I think it's kind of sleeper climbing up the ranks, becoming more and more viable. I honestly think after this patch, it's probably going to end up in about the middle of the B tier here. Focusing on just doing raw damage overall seems to be a really good strategy for it, and just trying to survive and attack, especially in solo shuffle. But without major buffs to it in terms of burst damage, I'm not sure if it'll climb much higher than this. And again, this is kind of like low B bordering C tier. For Frost Mage, definitely better than Devastation or Fire. I think that its sustained damage is going to be in a much better position if the game moves towards more of a sustain oriented gameplay, given the changes that have happened. It's getting a little bit of a buff moving into this patch, and it's also really good at containing some of these melee DPS that are likely to be strong. So if we're seeing a lot of warrior comps and cleaves, Frost Mage could have a good position in dealing with those, so probably about middle of the pack. Shadow Priest, my expectation is that it's still going to be remaining on the A tier, maybe one of the best ranged. Is it going to be an S tier? I'm tempted to say that it could, just because of how good it is with Assassination Rogue. But note that your versatility has gone down a lot in 10.0.5. I don't think you're going to be as flexible in terms of all the specs you can play with. I think you're going to need to play with a class that can destroy someone like a warrior, a windwalker, or a rogue, as opposed to maybe kind of going with a fluff damage class like a warlock or a moonkin, due to the damage nerfs that have happened to you over time. So high A tier probably, not nearly as flexible as it had been in the past. Affliction Warlock, as the game is moving away from burst into sustain and longer matches that get to dampening, I think Affliction does get better and better. However, you are countered quite heavily by the healing output of certain healers that are likely to be strong. So due to that, I'm a bit hesitant to put it much higher than the A tier. Just because Affliction is one of those things where you queue into a lobby or queue into a match and certain specs will just completely nullify anything you're trying to do. And then other times you're just going to rampage and run people over with monstrous amounts of damage. So that coin flip nature is what's holding it back onto the A tier. Demonology Warlock, you're probably still, I want to say a low A. Probably, so it's really tough to debate, honestly, between Affliction and Demonology. Bringing MS and all of the annoying crowd control effects you have is a really key difference between Affliction, where you can control enemies, prevent your team from dying, or set up and end games and win them, whereas Affliction can't do that. It's just raw output, but your raw output is significantly lower than Affliction. You won't be topping the meter on scoreboards at all. So those two kind of counterbalance each other in terms of their position here on the tier list. Now we've got Elemental Shaman, and I'm gonna have to move myself out of the way here. Elemental Shaman got nerfed, but I think it's probably the least of all of the nerfs that came through. I'm expecting Ellie probably still remains as an S tier specialization, as its damage output was just so monstrously higher than every other spec at the moment, and it's still, I think, going to be in a very similar position, and going to be a really strong pickup for 10.0.5. Destruction Warlock, much the same as Demonology Affliction. It's really tough. These specs are all nail biter close to each other in terms of overall tuning and compositions and position. Destruction going to be doing more damage than Demonology, as the trade-off is a little bit less crowd control, but it's going to be AoE sustain and a little bit more bursty than Affliction in its current iteration, but all definitely competitive. Maybe I would say Affliction is lower than Destro, only by a bit, and this is like really nitpicky. They're really close. The balance tuning on these in terms of against each other is really good at the moment. Mistweaver Monk, this is one where people are telling me they think it's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best healer ever, and I just don't see it. I feel like you have to compromise your positioning if you're going to do a fist weaving build. Its life cocoon cooldown is going to be a little bit shorter, but there's so many abilities that counter shield effects, like warriors and evokers, that I'm not sold on it. Your mana's going to be a little bit better. You're probably better than you were in the lower ranks, but I honestly want to put this like middle of the pack. Like, and that's probably a safe conservative pick, so it could go a little bit better or a little bit worse. Likely it's a little bit better, but I personally can't, because you're one of the healers that has to cast a lot. That makes you really susceptible to being interrupted, or you have to compromise your positioning. And due to the fact that they haven't made your fist weaving build a smart heal, means that it can heal a random target, not the one you want, and then suddenly you lose the game because of it. I think it's probably still going to be middle overall for PvP. Now, Holy Paladin, I think is going to be an S tier spec. And now your Melee Wings may become situational, but I still don't even expect that. I think that you're going to have infinite mana now with changes to the specializations, buff to its directs heals. We've already seen it represented, and I think it's just getting better, honestly. I think it's going to be a crazy powerful healer. Preservation Evoker, very similar. We haven't seen any real direct nerfs coming in against it. It's still really powerful just overall with its throughput. So my expectation is that's still going to be into the S tier. And Discipline Priest. Now this is one where I'm not sure 100% if I want to put it onto A or S tier. Due to the fact that you're getting so many overall changes to your class, more mana regeneration, more defensive cooldowns, more throughput. Really good patch to try a Discipline Priest, but because it's a prediction, I'm a little bit uncertain as to whether or not to say like, oh my god, it's the best healer or not until we see it play out more, but it's definitely the most promising patch for Discipline Priest so far in PvP. Now, Holy Priest, you're probably still a decent pickup, but you're not a Paladin. You're not a Preservation Evoker. Probably coming in as B. I think you're probably still better than Mistweaver, or it's really close for Holy Priest and Mistweaver Monk. Resto Druid, I think you're getting taken down a peg here. I don't think that you're S tier anymore. Mostly your throughput's getting nerfed a bit and your survivability is getting nerfed. So I think you're probably going to fall off a little bit in this position. And we'll have to wait and see, but I do think that you're going to be a lot weaker. So if you're a Resto Druid main right now, expect that your rating might go down a little bit when the patch comes out. Restoration Shaman, your offensive burst got nerfed, but your sustain and lava burst got buffed. So you're not going to one-shot people with Stormkeeper anymore. Your mana got nerfed, but I don't think it's really enough that your mana is ever going to be of impact. I think you're probably a high A, possibly pushing S, somewhere in the middle, maybe tied with Druid. Overall, the healer balance of these five is really close. Holy Priest is honestly really close as well, and Mistweaver is just a bit uncertain due to its kind of like more underdeveloped kit. I'm just not sold on it 100% just yet, even given the changes made to it, just based on its track record. And that's it. We got all the specs here. We got Assassination, Demon Hunter, Ellie, Holy Pally, Preservation on the S tier, and we covered the reasons why we thought all these specs were in the video. So if you're confused by something or don't understand, definitely make sure that you rewatch those videos and didn't just skip to the end to see this, because there's a lot of kind of logic put into where I'm positioning these at the moment in my estimations for 10.0.5. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. Comment down below with your thoughts. What are your expectations for specializations moving into this patch? Are you excited to try anything particularly? Is there something that I missed? Let me know, because again, I want this to be the best resource that it can be for you guys to use to enhance your gameplay. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.